Hello and welcome to this workshop on how to put a trend board together using Adobe Photoshop. First of all, I'm just going to explain a little bit about what a trend board actually is and the purpose it serves. It's basically a board that's created in order to make fashion relevant presentations. These are used either internally within your company or perhaps to a buyer or any other company or individual that would normally need to view a presentation. The boards can be actual physical boards. They're great fun. You go out and you collect fabric swatches, all sorts of elements, and actually make a physical board with things stuck on. But for practicality's sake and also ease of use and putting together and time, more and more boards are created entirely digitally. I like to do sometimes a little hybrid thing where it's mostly digital and then I might add some fabric swatches to the printed board at the end, but that's entirely up to you. What we're going to do today is have a little look at how we can get a nice board put together using Photoshop. So in essence, a trend board is a visual aid to help assess the current fashion environment and to visually present fashion or trend ideas to others. Now, trend boards can be presented to buyers to help communicate a collection, a general concept direction, and doesn't necessarily have to detail the exact pieces in a collection. A good trend board should be able to communicate things like silhouette, colour direction, print, pattern, and various design inspirations. Usually trend boards are used as a kind of broad illustration regarding trend direction, but you can also use boards to be very specific and show exact items that you plan to promote for the season. These boards are really better described as concept boards, but the techniques for creating them are just the same. So it doesn't make any difference whether it's a concept board, a trend board, or a mood board, if you will. Crucially, it's about visual communication, and written commentary should be kept to an absolute minimum. Now, I've seen in recent years trend boards getting extremely wordy. That's not what these are about. It's not about an illustrated essay here, guys. This is all about visualization. So you've got to keep that in mind. Also, Photoshop is not a great application for dealing with large bodies of text. It's okay for headline text and the odd word here and there, but it's really not the right tool for putting in great paragraphs of type. And a trend board is not the right place for great swathes of text. Okay, now I'm going to create my my trend board as A3, but only at about 150 dpi. That's just to keep the size manageable. So I'm going to start that now. So I'm just going to put in the dimensions for A3. Now I could, if I go to print, I should be able to find some presets here, and A3 is indeed one of my presets. So this is A3. Now you can see the dimensions here are 259 by 420. So you could just type in 259 by 420. I'm going to make my orientation for my trend board landscape. I just prefer a landscape board, but it's entirely up to you. If you're presenting lots of boards, whichever orientation you choose, I would stick to it throughout. So all my boards would be in this orientation. I'm going to change my resolution to 150 pixels. So I'm kind of halving the size really, but the physical print size, if I were to print this, would be A3, but the resolution is reduced. Now this is going to give me the advantage slightly when I'm using found images off the internet, which tend to be lower resolution. If I stick with 300 dpi, my images, my found images are all going to come in looking very, very small. So that's why I've done that. Also, to keep the size down a bit, I'm sticking with 8-bit RGB colour. And my background is going to be white. I don't really need to work with these advanced options. This is just about colour profile, and at this stage you don't really need to worry too much about that. I'm sticking with this working RGB. So I'm just making my document, and there it is. Now, one of the most intimidating things in the world has got to be a blank piece of paper or a blank screen. Knowing where to put that first item is really, really tricky. So we're going to do something to help ourselves along here. I'm going to use some guides. I'm going to set up my guides. So if I go to the View menu, and here you can see I've got something called New Guide Layout. So I'm just going to go to this, and you can see I've actually already set this up. So I've divided my page up into squares. I've also got these little margins. Can you see I've got this space from the top of the page to this first line here, and also from the sides as well, all the way around. That's my margin, and you can see I've got a 1.2 centimetre margin, or 12 millimetres. I've got 11 columns in here and 8 rows. That's given me an almost square look. You can also see that I've got something called a gutter here. This is a 4 millimetre gutter, and it's the distance between each of these squares. This is a useful device. It separates things out. It allows me to control my page quite nicely. So I'm going to use this as my guide layout. So there we are. So that's my my guide layout set out. Now, instantly the page is far less intimidating than it was. Just having these guidelines on the page really helps when it comes to putting items onto the page. Now, what we're trying to achieve here is something that speaks of the trend, speaks of how fashion is moving, a direction that fashion is moving in. We are not trying to create a work of art. So don't overface yourself. Don't try and cut things out that can't be cut out. Every year I see people trying to cut out tiny little images of catwalk models, cut off complex backgrounds, and they wonder why they can't cut out hair, and there's no information in those images. They're very, very tiny. So don't try and do that. By all means use them, but just use them as they are. It's not essential to cut everything out. So we're going to start off by opening up an image. So I'm just going to go to File and Open. And if I go into this folder here, hopefully, there we are, I'm going to find some images in here. So I've got this one here. This one's called Hemp. And I think I might use this as a background for my, my trend board. Now, the trend board that I'm going to make is for a trend called homespun. So it's going to feature lots of natural fibres, and I'm going to start off with this image called Hemp. So I'm just going to open this up, and this is going to form part of my background. So you can see here I've now got 2 tabs open. This is going to be my trend board, and this is the hemp image. Now I want to just drag this. Now I could do this in a number of different ways. I could select the whole thing, copy it and paste it, or alternatively I can use this tool here. This is the Move tool. If you hover over any of the tools in Photoshop, you can see there that it gives you its name. You can also see here that it says that it's got a little V next to it. Now that's the keyboard shortcut. So if I want to access that tool again, I just need to hit the V on the keyboard and it will take me straight to the Move tool. Okay, so there we have it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this this image by just grabbing hold of it and dragging it up to the tab for my trend board, and then literally drag and drop. So I've literally dragged it to the tab, then moved into the middle of my page, and then released my mouse button, or in my case it's a trackpad, and dropped the image there. Now you can see it's a little on the small side because I'm using an A3 document. This is a found image off the internet. This is going to be common to you guys. You're going to be finding stuff and it's not going to be particularly big, but it's a trend board, so it's all about just a feeling rather than image quality. I do want reasonable quality. I don't want things falling apart and bitmapping too badly. But I can just upsize this a little. So I'm going to go and change the size of this. So I'm going to use Edit and something here called Free Transform. Now you can see here that Free Transform has a keyboard shortcut. Now I'm using a Mac, so this little symbol here denotes the Command key. If you're working on a PC, you use Control instead. So wherever you see the Command key in this tutorial, just use Control instead. On a Mac, Command, PC, Control. So Command or Control T will take you to Free Transform, and you can see I've got this bounding box. Can you see this bounding box around my image? Now I can just drag this out. Now the newer versions of Photoshop mean that you can scale this up in proportion without holding any keys down. If you're using an older version of Photoshop, and I don't know why you would, most people are subscribers, so you've got access to new versions of the software. But if you need to, hold down the Shift key to constrain. But as I say, if you're using Creative Cloud and you're a subscriber, you should have a nice new version. And you can see there that scales up quite nicely. Okay, so I just either double click or you can click the tick if I just undo that and show you again. So I'm just going to scale this up. So I'm just dragging out the corners so it covers the whole page. Oops, a daisy. Like so, and I double clicked the first time, but you can see here up on the status bar this little tick, so I can click that and it allows that transformation to take place. Okay, so this is going to be part of my background. Now it's a little bit plain, so I think I might look for another image. So I've got another image I think called Strata, so let's see if I can find that. There it is. So I think I'm going to use this as well. So I'm just going to open this up. I'm going to bring it in exactly the same way. So I'm just going to use the Move key to drag up to that tab and drop, and then just situate it where I want it to go. And then Command T or Control T and scale this up like so, and then double click or click the tick, whichever you prefer. Now I'm not very keen on this very harsh line down here, so I want to soften this. Now as we go through this exercise, you'll notice that I am very keen on editing in a non-destructive fashion. In other words, I don't like throwing pixels away permanently. I don't like damaging images permanently. I always like to be able to edit my images as I go along, okay, and change my mind. So I'm just going to add something called a layer mask. Now, if I have a look over at my layers over here, here's that image. You can see its little thumbnail here. And down here, if I hover over this, you can see it says Add Layer Mask. So I'm just going to do that. And you can see now that I've got this little blank white page, that's what it appears to be, linked. This is like a little linking tool to this image. Now that means I've got this mask and it's linked to this image. In other words, they will both move together. Now, at the moment, it's completely white. Now, white means that the entire image is revealed, okay? So if I want to turn the lights off, so to speak, I can conceal some of those pixels. So to do this, I'm going to switch my foreground and background colours around. You can see over here, I've got white in the foreground and black in the background. Can you see that? Set background colour and set foreground colour. Now the easiest way to switch those around is just by hitting X on your keyboard, the letter X, and you can see that just switches those two elements around. And then I can choose my brush tool, okay, and you can see here if I hover over it, let's just go back, the keyboard shortcut for the brush tool is the letter B. Okay, so the next time I want to use that, I'm going to just press B on my keyboard. And I can make my brush bigger by using the parentheses keys. They're the keys that look like little brackets next to the letter P, in between the letter P and return on your keyboard. Okay, so I don't need to go to any menus or anything. I could go up here and change my size, but it's much easier just to do it. You can see the changes taking place up here. I'm now at 175 pixels, and when I press the parentheses keys either up or down, there we go, you can see I can change those that brush size. Now I can sweep away this image like so. I could brush the whole thing away if I wanted. And then by switching the black and white foreground and background colours around again by hitting X on my keyboard, I can brush the image back in again. Okay, so I can sweep this away and I can make it softer by making the brush even bigger. Like so. Or I can even change the flow of the brush or the opacity. As an alternative to using the brush tool to sweep away pixels from the mask, what we could do is use the gradient tool instead. So making sure I've got the gradient selected over here. Can you see? I'm going to use the gradient tool. If you can't see the gradient tool, it might be because it's being hidden by the paint bucket tool. Keyboard shortcut is G, but if it's not the topmost tool, then pressing G would just bring up the paint bucket tool. So make sure you've got the gradient tool selected. The gradient is currently set from white to black, and I'm going to just drag a line. I'm going to hold down my shift key to constrain this so it's a nice straight line from here to about here, and you can see it adds a nice gradient there. And if you have a look at the thumbnail, you can see where it's white, the image is completely opaque, and where it's black, the image is completely transparent, and where you've got shades of grey in between, 256 shades of grey to be precise, that's 8 bits of transparency across this gradient. Okay, so I'm quite happy with that, but I think that overall the background is a little bit heavy. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select both of these layers. Okay, so you can see there I've got both layers selected, and how I did that was I held down the shift key. Shift allows me to select more than one object, or in this case more than one layer, and then I can go to the little drop down menu and choose to merge those layers together. So you can see that this now is a single layer, and I'm going to rename this layer, and I'm going to call it background image. There we are, so it's called background image, and I'm going to bring in another image now. Now I've already opened this tab. You can see here this is the image that I'm going to bring in next. This is called Natural Belt, and I'm going to take it in exactly the same way as the other images. So I've chosen the Move tool, and I'm going to just drag and drop my image like so, and I'm going to position it down here. Now I've got an idea of how big I want this to be. I think I'm going to have it about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 grid squares high and about 3 wide. So I need to scale this image down somewhat. So I'm going to use the free transform that we used earlier. So Command or Control T, and then I'm just going to drag this down so it's about the right height. Okay, so that's approximately the right height. I might make it a little bit taller. Okay, and I'm just going to move this over. You'll see what I'm going to do in a minute. So I want 3 grid squares across. Now this isn't going to constrain in the proportions that I want it, so I'm going to have to crop this image, and to do this I'm going to use my layer mask again, but I'm going to show you a different way of using it this time. I'm going to use the rectangular marquee tool, and you can see there that the keyboard shortcut is the letter M, so you can press M on your keyboard or select it directly, I don't really mind, and I'm going to just draw out a rectangle the size that I want it to be. So I'm going across 3 grid squares and down 5, like so, and then making sure that I've got the correct layer selected over here on your layers panel, and then we just click on the add layer mask icon at the bottom, and you can see there that it's cropped that image so it's exactly the size that I want it to be. Okay, and I'm quite happy with that now. So next I want to open up maybe some textures, maybe some fabric swatches to add to my image. So, but before I do that, I'm just going to call my new layer Natural Belt. If I don't keep on top of this, it won't take very long. Oops, I've spelled natural wrong. Natural, there we are, belt. It won't take very long before I've got so many layers and I've lost control of my document and I can't find things, I can't select things easily. So it's well worth taking the time and trouble to name your layers, okay? So I'm going to just go to File and Open, and I'm going to look for, that's quite a nice texture, so I think we'll have this one first of all. I just want these in kind of little squares if you like. Now if you don't like my drag and drop technique, alternatively you can go and select all. So Command A or Control A will select the entire image, and then I can copy that, so Command C or Control C, or alternatively you can go to Edit and Copy. There's the keyboard shortcut. So I've copied that and then back to our trend board. Now again, I could pop it down and mask it as I go, or alternatively I could decide where I want it to be. So I've got my marquee tool selected here, and this time I'm going to draw out a little square marquee that's going across 2 by 2 grid squares, like so. And this time I'm going to paste into that shape. So if I go to Edit, you'll see we've got something called Paste Special here, and we've got something called Paste in Place. Now at the minute I don't have a layer selected, so I'm just going to select this layer. That's important. If you've got no layer selected, you can't do this next thing. So this time when I go to Paste Special, you can see all these are illuminated. So if you go and they're grayed out, make sure you get a layer selected, and I'm going to choose Paste Into, and I'm going to paste into that marquee shape. There it is, like so, and you can see it automatically generates a little layer mask. Now this image is much bigger than that little square, so what I can do, you can if you have a look here, you can see that this image and its layer mask are linked, but this one and this one aren't, which is good for us, because what I want to do is I want to scale down this image. Now notice it's the image that's selected at the moment. Can you see those little white edges around here? Now the layer mask is selected. Going back to the image, and I'm going to use free transform, Control T or Command T, and I'm going to scale this image down. So I'm going to just drag it from this corner. It's just disappeared temporarily, and there we are. Make it a bit smaller so you can see more of the detail. Okay, so I don't want to stretch this in any way. I'm just scaling it in proportion. There we go. So I've got as much detail as possible, and I can move that around in there. So if there's a part of the image that I want to show, I've got control over the part of the image that I want. So I'm quite happy with that. And again, you can click the tick or double click the image, and it accepts that transformation. Now if I want to, I can choose to link these together. So if I want to move the mask and the image at the same time, I go to the Move tool and I can pick that whole thing up and move it. Okay, I don't really want to move it. Right, so now I'm going to go and find another image. So again, it's going to go in this space. So I'm going to just make a little row of these textural squares. And then let's see what else I've got. So not that one. Yeah, I quite like this one. This is Justine Boffer. Some of these have come from WGSN. So I'm going to select all, Control A and copy again, go back to my trend board, and I'm going to paste special and paste into. And if you notice, the keyboard shortcut is Command Shift and Alt V. Okay, you need a full complement of fingers there, and then Control T to scale this down. Now you might want it to be quite magnified, you might want to see close in detail, something like that, or you could make it much smaller. The choice is absolutely yours. Okay, I think I quite like that. Let's see what it looks like a bit smaller. And that's the nice thing, until we click that tick, we can change our mind and scale and rescale, okay, without damaging that image. It's only when we accept the transformation and commit to it that we lose those pixels, okay. So I'm happy with that, so I'm going to leave that there. I think I'll bring in another one, so same technique again. Okay, and again, let's see what I can find. Yeah, I quite like that metallic knit. Yeah, the metallic knit, I think. I'll go with that one. Select all, Control A, copy, and paste into. This time I'm using the keyboard shortcut, like so. Oh, I like the close-up detail that that's come in with. Let's see if I can find something nicer. I think I'm going to keep this one nice and big. Yeah, I like that. Maybe that bit there. Okay, double click or click the tick, whatever you fancy. So yeah, I'm quite liking how this is looking. I've got this funny little gap up at the top here. I don't want to fill it with with lots of tiny little things. So I'll have to think carefully about how I'm going to utilise that space. So I'm just going to have a little bit of a consider over what I'm going to do next. Okay, so I'm looking at this and I'm thinking I could do with maybe some more textural, fabric-y type images in here, but I'm fighting against this background image, which is a little bit on the harsh side. So I'm going to make sure I've got my background image selected, and I'm going to just change the opacity down to about 50%, maybe a little bit more, 50, I've gone for 54% in this instance. So that's better because now I can see these images a little bit clearer. I'm going to add another marquee square across those 4 little squares there, and I'm going to go and look for another texture image. So I'm just saving what I've done. So open up, and I think I'm going to go this cream and blue stripe image is quite nice, so I'm going to use this one. And again, I'm going to copy that and paste into, so the keyboard shortcut, remember, is Command or Control, Alt and Shift and the letter V. And then I'm using Control, Command T to transform that image. So I want this one to be quite small. I want to see most of the image like that. Yeah, quite like that. Let's just move that over. Yeah, I'm happy with that. So I've now got these 4 images, and I think what's needed now is my trend board title. Now this trend, as I mentioned earlier, is called Homespun, and it's a trend from WGSN for spring-summer 2021. So I'm going to use my my text tool, and I'm just going to draw out a box, I think. I don't know quite where I'm going to put it, so I'll just make it quite big. I'm going to type in home spun spring summer 2021. It's a bit big at the minute, so I'm just going to shrink that down so it fits on a single line, a bit like that. I don't like that typeface. It's currently in Futura, so I'm going to just try an impact for now. And I'm going to range it to the left. The keyboard shortcut for that is Command Shift and L. Alternatively, you can just click these little buttons up here on your status bar. Okay, so that's range left, and that's centered, and range right or right align. So there we go. So I'm okay with that. It's at the moment it's black. I don't think I'm going to leave it like that. I'll probably show you a technique once I've decided where I'm going to put that, to turn this into like a texture. All right. So, but we'll come to that in a little while because I'm not altogether convinced that this belongs in this top corner. But we'll wait. Wait a minute. I also think I could do with finding some images of some actual clothing, okay, a kind of lifestyle shot. I think, let's see what I've got. I'm going to open, oh, yeah, that's fine. This is a shop called Jumper. So I'm going to open this up, and again, I'm just going to drag and drop this. I don't know where it's going to go. That's the thing about trend boards. They are quite organic. So I don't think I want it quite as large as this image, but similar in size. So I might make it a little bit shorter. So Control T. Let's see how this looks. Whoops. I'm going to just move that down because I don't want to chop her hair off particularly. Right, yeah, I think there'll do. And then I'm just going to use the marquee tool, using my guides again to set the marquee up, like so. And then I choose layer mask, and you can see it'll crop that for me there. Again, I'm going to have to think about how this is going to end up looking eventually, but I'm all right with that as it stands for now. I'm going to look for an inspiration shot now. Now earlier I was thinking that this reminded me of a beach, and there's kind of sandy colours in here, and these blues that appear through all these textural images are kind of like a spring sky. So I could do with an image, and maybe I could put that up here of a beach. Let's see, I think I found one already. There we go, the Norfolk beach. So let's open that up. Yeah, I think I like that. I'm just going to go back to my trend board and decide where it's going to go. I think I'm going to put it in this space. So I'm going to control where that's going to go in. So it's going to go in there. Go back to my Norfolk beach and copy that. So select all and copy, and then pop back, and then I can paste into. So Command Alt Shift or Control Alt Shift and V to paste that. And then I'm just going to scale that down, and you can see how well those colours, the colours in the sky here, and these greys in the stones, and these kind of beigey colours really work very well. I'm very happy with that. Maybe just drag that across so we've got a little bit more sand. Yeah, I'm liking that. Okay, so that's my my beach inspiration shot in there. Now I'm going to go back to looking for some images of maybe some models wearing some clothing, and let's see what I've got. So I've got, what have I got? I need something to get me started. No, I've got that one in already. Yeah, I think we'll start with this. He's got the blues in his jeans and these cream in his hat and these kind of nice stripes going on here. Yeah, I like that image. I don't know quite how I'm going to treat this, so I'm going to just drag and drop it onto my trend board. It's a little bit big at the minute, so I'm just going to scale it down. And I could, now at the minute I've dropped it, you can see it's kind of dropped in the middle here. So I think I just want to pop this on the top for now. Now I don't want all that background in. I could add a layer mask and use a brush. Okay, if I just hit X to switch my foreground and background colours around and make my brush a little bigger by using those parentheses keys. Remember that from the very beginning when we were dealing with the background? And I could brush away some of the background. Now this is much quicker than trying to do cutouts. Plus this image is a bit small for cutting out. There's not enough image quality. So don't try and cut out. You will spend a huge amount of your time trying to make a decent cutout where none is really possible. I'm not sure I like that. I think there is a better way, but I'll leave it there for now. We'll come back to it shortly. Now the thing is, I haven't broken this image. It's still completely restorable. If I hit X again, I can switch that back and bring all that background back. Okay. I can still see bits of black on the there we are. So what I could do instead is I'm going to use this tool here. This is the polygon lasso tool, and I'm just going to, I've got my my layer mask selected, and I'm just going to make a kind of chopped out, almost like I'd cut it with a pair of paper scissors, like I was cutting it out of a magazine, just roughly. So I'm not trying to be too neat or too careful. It really is like just being choppy. And if I just delete that, so I've deleted the mask, so I've got the marquee on the picture, and now if I click and make a new layer mask, you can see it gives me this chopped out appearance. Now I quite like that, but it's very difficult to see where the edge of the image is. So I'll just hide my guides a second so you can see a little bit clearer. So I need some depth to this, and the best way to add it is by adding a little drop shadow, which is a layer effect. Now we can add layer effects in a myriad of different ways. The thing about Photoshop, it's been around for a very long time, and with each new incarnation they find new and different ways of doing things, better ways quite often, but because people have already learnt how to use the software, the old ways also get left. So there's a thousand ways to do this, almost. We've got this little icon down here on your layer palette, and you can see it says add layer style. We can use that. Alternatively, we can go to the layer menu and add layer style. So we can go here. It does exactly the same thing. Alternatively, we can just click in this blank area on this particular layer, so not on the name or on the thumbnails, but in this grey area over here. So if I double click, we get our layer style panel coming up, and we've got the same choices that we would have as if we went to the effects button down here, and I'm going to add a drop shadow. So I'm going to click on drop shadow. Now be careful, if I allowed it to stay as it was for a second, if I go to where it was when we opened up and I just click in the little checkbox, you'll notice it's added a drop shadow, okay, but the controls for it belong to blending options. So please make sure that you choose the options for drop shadow, okay, and then we can control how this drop shadow looks. It's a little bit soft and a little bit far away at the moment, so I'm just going to shorten the distance and decrease the size. Okay, and I can change the angle if I want to. And I can decrease the opacity. Okay, so I've ended up with something that's really quite subtle. I've also got, by the looks of things, a bevel and emboss. I can just see I've got this funny, yep, I clicked on that, so I need to take that off. That's much better. Okay, so now I've just got my little drop shadow, and it's quite subtle. You can see that the image is very close to the paper. I could make it even closer. There we are. So we just want a hint of depth, okay? And I'm quite happy with that. All right, so this is coming along quite nicely now. So I'm going to carry on using these techniques to build up my, my image. So I'll see you in a minute. Okay, as you can see, I've now opened up several more images and just basically dumped them on the page. These are all the images that I want to include in my trend board. I've also taken the time and trouble to name my layers. Okay, so now I have to start making some sense of all this. I've got this image here called Maddie's Stripes, and it's a kind of, it's another textural thing, so I feel like it belongs up here. It's quite a strong a strong image, so I'm going to make it a little smaller. I think I just need my guides on to help me, and I'm thinking perhaps it should only be the height of one of these little squares, maybe the same width. So I'm just going to reduce this down in size till it's approximately the right size, and then I'm going to click the tick and I'm going to shift it. I'm going to put it up here. Now that means I'm going to have to do something with this title, but we'll worry about that in a sec. I'm just going to put a layer mask on this. So I'm going to do this by using the technique I showed you earlier, where we use the marquee tool to make the shape of our mask. So that's what I want to mask, and then making sure I've got the right layer selected, I click the layer mask, and there it is. Okay, now I did think that this was the wrong place for my title, so I need to find that title. So I've selected it there, hit M for the, oh sorry, V for the move tool, and I'm going to shift that down here. That needs to be in the foreground. Now I'm just changing my layer order by dragging that up. Do you see that? So I dragged it from down here and it's now on the top. I'm thinking that that's a bit big. I'm thinking it shouldn't really take up any more room than up to about here. So I'm just going to scale it down. So Control T for free transform again. So let's just see what happens. Make it smaller. Let's just pop that on there like that. Maybe a bit smaller still. Just going to nudge that up using my keyboard. There we are. I'm thinking it doesn't really need to be any bigger than that. I'm still not happy that it's just black text, but we'll worry about that in a minute. Okay, so I've got some other things here. I've got this organic yarn, so I'm going to just scale that and pop that into place. It doesn't need to be a huge image. So I'm going to just scale it. That's about the right width, I think, for me. Let's just decide how much room that's going to take up. I'm thinking a little square like that, perhaps. Yeah, I think so. I'm just going to unlink these because I want to move this image independently. So I'm just going to get the move tool and just move that up, and you notice that the mask is staying still and the image is moving. Obviously, if these two things were linked together, both the mask and the image would move in conjunction with each other. I'm thinking that could go bit higher. There we are. I think I'm happy with that. Then this image here, this is called Solar Shop, so that's the next one down. I think that could potentially sit underneath maybe. I don't know if I've got room. Let's just try it. So it needs to go there. Scale it down so it's too wide. That's almost exactly the right height to fill 3, so this doesn't work. Perhaps my beach is too big. So let's find that Norfolk beach. And again, remember, I can remove that mask. So I'm going to delete the mask and I'm going to reapply it this time so it takes up less space. So I'm going to just have the beach sitting in that area there and reapply that mask. There we go. And again, I'm going to unlink those so I can move that image. There we are. That's a bit more pleasing. Okay, and then I can move my my organic yarn. I need to link those together so they move together. That's more like it. And then I just need a little mask on here just to clip the top of this image so it sits perfectly in my grid. Oops, don't need that on there. My mistake. There we go. So yeah, I'm feeling that a little bit more now. Let's just have a little look at what I can do with these. I think we need to look at these being cut out. So I think some of these are too big and some maybe not big enough. So let's just see what I've got. So this is the duck egg sari image. I rather like this. I think it's got some lovely colour in it. So I think I'm going to move this into a more prominent position. So I'm going to put this over here. I think this image needs to go larger and in front. So I'm going to just drag this up to the top. Like that. So it's in front of everything except the title. And I think maybe it needs to go bigger. So I'm going to scale it up. So Command T for that free transform thing. And I'm going to see if I can make her reach from, I'm going to pop her head here. And I'm going to scale so she's almost stood on the title. So that's how big I want her to be, but almost entirely in this single column. Maybe her arms are sticking out. I wonder if I can get her foot almost resting on where it says spun. Okay, we'll try that. I'm going to use the same technique that I used for the floppy hat guy who is buried behind here at the moment. So I'm going to use the polygon lasso tool to do this kind of rough cutout. So rather than mix up techniques by using the brush and brushing things away, I think that would just look scruffy. So I'm just going to do this kind of rough cutout. I'm just going to go around her foot. Like so, and I'm just going to continue going until I get back to the beginning. Just talk amongst yourselves. Right, I'm going to just hide my guides because Oh, it turns out I can't while I'm doing this. There we go. I can always change the shape of that in a minute. So now I'm going to add that layer mask, like so. I'm going to perfect that in a second, I think. That's not too bad. Now I want the same drop shadow that I've got on here. Now I don't want to have to add another one and risk the effect that it might be slightly different or the angle's different. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag this one up onto where it says Duck Egg Sari. So I'm going to hold down my Alt key. This will copy this. Okay, so I'm going to drag. You can see I've got a double-headed arrow there. Can you see I've got a black and white arrowhead? That's telling you that it's going to make a copy. So it's going to leave it on the floppy hat image, and it's also going to copy it onto that Duck Egg Sari. So now I've got two images with that little drop shadow going on. Okay, and I'm just going to, I've got my layer mask selected, and I'm going to just chop that off. Okay, that's all I have to do with that. Oops. Okay, so I'm okay with that. I'm going to do a similar thing with these images here. That one's called Crinkle Dress, which is this one here, and I'm going to do a similar thing with this. I'm just going to, I'll chop it out over here so I can see what I'm doing. I'm going to hide my guides first so I don't get that jumping to my guides. Okay, I'm just clicking around exactly the same way as I did with the sari and the floppy hat image. There we go. And same technique, click on the layer mask and it adds that. And again, I can hold the Alt key and drag my shadow and drop the shadow on there. So I've got the same shadow. And I think I'm going to pop this over here. I think maybe that needs to be in front of the sari. So I'm going to just drag that up. That's better. And I've got another image behind here. I think it's called Trouser Suit. Where's it gone? There it is. So again, I'm going to just raise this up so I can see it. And again, same technique. Sorry for the silence, although you're probably relieved. There we go. And again, click on the layer mask and move this into the position that I want it. And I think I'll pop this here. I'm not sure this jumper is in the right place, so I might move that up. So where's the jumper? It's here. So I'm just going to push this. Again, I need my guides on so I can make sure that it's in the right place. Just nudge that down and nudge it over so it's sitting correctly. Okay, I might make that smaller yet, I don't know. I think I could do with another image, so I'm just going to go and see if I can find something else. I just feel like I'm a little bit light. Yeah, I'll use this one. So again, I'm just going to drag and drop and pull that up to the top like so. And once again, same technique. Once you've settled on a technique, it's best to stick with it. I really should have turned those guides off again. You might want to leave more of an edge or less of an edge, but if you're rough cutting something out, you want to make sure that it looks like it's deliberate and obvious and not just like a bad cutout. Okay, so I think that's a bit big. I'm going to make it a similar size to that crinkly dress. That's a bit small now. But because I haven't committed to that scaling, I haven't thrown away more pixels than I need to. So I think I'm going to just pop that maybe there. Maybe a tiny bit smaller. There we are. Okay, so I'm okay with that. And this is coming along quite nicely. I've got this odd gap now where I moved that title before. I've got this strange gap. I've also got a funny space down here. I think this jumper's not working properly for me. So I'm tempted to change the scaling on that. So there's the jumper image. So let's just see what happens if I make it smaller. Maybe it needs to be that size, but maybe just cropped differently. So I'm going to just lose the mask and re-mask it. Yeah, I think that's probably better. Maybe move the image up. So I've just unlinked it. There we go. Okay, I'm happy with that. I also need to add the drop shadow onto this image here. So it's called, I've forgotten what it's called. It must be this layer one because I've not named it. Okay, so I'm going to call this one Linen Crush. Linen Crushed. And I'm going to copy by holding down the Alt key the drop shadow. So there we go. And this is starting to get some form to it now. I'm not feeling things standing off enough though, and also I've got nowhere for my colour swatches, so I'm going to have to do some thinking about how I'm going to address that. I also feel like everything's kind of just hanging a little bit straight. I've got these very organic cut out looks, but everything's still stuck on dead straight, so I feel like I'm going to have to address that slightly. I don't want to make everything really higgledy-piggledy because I have got a grid, but I just feel like it's a little bit organic, but not quite organic enough. So I think maybe I'm going to address the floppy hat a little bit. I'm going to use Free Transform again. Now, Free Transform so far we've used just for scaling, but we can also do things like this, where we can rotate the image just by going near the corners. You'll see the cursor changes into this kind of little curvy double-headed arrow. So I'm just going to put that on a tiny and just scale down a little bit and then lift it up. Yeah, I think that looks a bit better. Okay, we can also see more of this jumper now. Although I don't like that edge, so maybe I'm going to move my linen crush over slightly. There we are, that's better. And the crinkle dress a tiny bit. There we are. Right, okay, so this is looking better. I also need to do something to make these stand off the page a little. I don't want to employ the same drop shadow effect though, because they're behind these images. So these look like they've kind of just been placed on top, whereas these look like they might be actually part of the background. So I'm going to use a slightly different approach with these. So these are all called texture something. So texture 1, texture 2, 3 and 4. So I'm going to start with texture 1, which I think is that one. Yes, it is. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a stroke, a kind of line, if you will, around the edge of the picture. So I'm just going to double click to call up my layer styles, and I'm going to choose stroke. So remember to actually select stroke, otherwise you won't see what you're going to get here. Now you can see I've got this horrible purple. Well, it's only horrible in the context that it doesn't go with anything on this image. I need something that's within the picture. So I'm going to choose the colour, and you'll notice once I've clicked on the colour, I'll just show you that again. So I've clicked on the colour, and when I move over my page, you can see that I get this eyedropper, and I can pick up colours within the image, and I can look for something that's actually within my image. So I could choose something from her skin tone, or maybe something from this image. This has got a beautiful, rich, dark brown background. Now I quite like that, that dark brown. I just think the thickness of the line is a little bit heavy, so I'm going to take this down. Maybe let's try 16 pixels width. That looks okay to me. I don't want to have to do that over and over, but again, I can copy this stroke. If you have a look at your layers panel, if I hold down the Alt key, I can drag that stroke and drop it on all the other images that I want it to be added to. Okay, so just by holding down the Alt key, you can just drag and drop that. I also want it to be on this little Madeline stripe. So I need to find that image because it's, oh, there it is. So again, holding down the Alt key, drag that and drop it to there. And I think that looks okay. I'm not going to put anything on these, I don't think, or the jumper or this skirt image. But we do need some other stuff, because I've got this kind of bald spot down here, and a little bald area here. Now I did say that Illustrator isn't great for text, but I'm going to show you some ways of introducing text that are kind of illustrative. Okay, we're also going to develop a colour swatch palette as well, so that's what we're going to do next. Okay, so let's go into the final stages for our trend board now. Now I've got some odd gaps, a distinct lack of any text at all apart from the title. Now I did say right at the beginning that this is supposed to be about the visual, and even when we add text, it should still be about the visual. We've also got no colour swatches at all. So I need to address some of these problems. Now, I think I'm going to put a little piece of text in here and maybe another piece here. And I need my colour swatches. So I'm thinking that they're going to go down this side. So I need to do something with this image. So I'm going to make this a bit smaller and move it over, I think. So if I remember right, that's called Natural Belt. And I think I want it to be the same height, but I'm going to move it over one square. So I'm going to just open up my guides again, and I'm just going to move this into that zone there. This is plenty of room for my my colour swatches now. So I've got enough room for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5 different colours, which is just fine. And then I've got this like little grid just here. I'm also thinking that this is now in an odd space. If you look, it's not on my grid anywhere. I'm thinking it should really be in this kind of zone. So I'm going to move that one. I think it's called Trouser Suit. Where has it gone? There it is. So this is why naming your layers is a good idea. So I'm going to just pop that in between those two. I think it's a little bit tall, so I'm just going to shrink it down slightly. So it kind of sits in the middle like that a bit, I think. Maybe a bit bigger. Yeah, I can live with that. That looks okay. Yeah. Okay, so I'm happy with the position that I've got that in now. I'm going to add my texture onto my my text down here. So this is called Homespun. So I'm going to select that, and then we're going to go to the Select menu and load selection. Now we've not done this before. Every single layer has a transparency layer, and we're going to load up the transparency layer for this particular layer. So it's called a channel, and if I click OK, you can see there that I've now got this marquee selection. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up a texture. I think it's called Textured Beige. It's this one. And I'm going to select all and copy, and then pop back, and I'm going to paste into. So Command Alt Shift or Control Alt Shift V, and we paste into. We've done that lots of times through this tutorial. And then I'm going to just scale my texture down. So it's a bit closer knit. Oh, I think I'm going to find there where it's a bit darker. I'm not sure it's dark enough, so I can make this a bit darker still. So I'm just going to click the tick, and then I'm going to go to the image layer and choose adjustments, and I'm going to, I could change the levels or the exposure, hue and saturation. I might actually change the hue and saturation, so I'm going to just saturate this up a little bit and take the lightness out so it goes a bit darker. There we go, but I want to still be able to see that texture. I quite like that, so I can live with that. I think I might also add a drop shadow onto this. So I'm going to copy this drop shadow, hold the Alt key, and drop the drop shadow there. I'm going to change the layer name. I'm going to call it Homespun Texture, and I'm going to hide the original text because it's not bringing anything to the party at this stage, but I'm not going to delete it because I don't know at this stage if I'm going to require it at some point. I don't know if that's the best the title can look, or whether or not I might want to experiment with it and try something a little bit different. Now I'm going to show you, this is a kind of tutorial within a tutorial here. I'm going to give you a little technique. I've got a piece of paper. This is my paper, and you can see it's got this torn edge effect. Let me just show you that. So that's the original paper, and then I've put this torn edge in here. And I'm going to show you how we've done that. So I'm just going to, there we go. So that's the original document. Well, actually it isn't, that is. So I'll delete that layer. Okay, so this is my original image. So what I'm going to do first of all is I'm going to get rid of this black background, and I really don't want this black background, so I am going to select it using this tool here. This is the quick selection tool, and I'm just going to drag over this black area. I can be quite brutal with it, but it's missed a few little bits. So what I'm going to do is go to the select menu and pick up anything similar. So it'll pull out any kind of holes that we don't want. There we are. And then I can actually invert that selection, because I don't want to, I'm not that brutal. I've inverted the selection, and then I can make a new layer from this selection. So Command J kind of jumps to a new layer. So if I have a look over on my layers panel now after doing Command J or Control J, you can see I've got something here called layer 1, and if I hide the original background layer, we've got this cut out version. Okay, now that's fine, but I want a torn edge. And what I've done is I've torn another piece of paper. Now I found this piece of paper. I didn't actually have any paper that looked like this, so I found it online, and but I wanted to have a torn edge. Well, I can't tear something I haven't got, but I can tear a plain piece of paper. So I tore an edge, as you can see, and I've scanned it. Okay, so this is a scan of a torn piece of paper, and I've deliberately tried to get it as textural as I possibly can. And then I'm going to take my torn edge image, so I'm going to select all and copy and go back to my note paper. Okay, and then I'm going to go to this panel here called channels, and you can see I've got my RGB, my red, green and blue channels, and I'm going to add a new one. Okay, so this is an alpha channel, and it deals purely in transparency. So I'm going to paste my torn edge here. I want to be able to see how this is going to look, so I've switched on all the other layers, but I've got the alpha 1 layer selected, and then I can manipulate by using Control T. We all know what that does by now. And I can rotate this round, so if it's at the wrong angle, so I might want it to look more like that. Okay, so this is the torn edge that I'm going to end up with. Okay, so I can move that and get it exactly as I want it to appear. I might want to just bring that right down there like that. And then when I'm happy with that, I can click OK and drop the selection. So Control D will drop the selection, or Command D. Now I've got this area up here. So if you have a look on my my thumbnail for the alpha channel, you can see I've got this black area. If you remember, black is completely transparent. Well, I don't want that. I want to be able to see this little piece of paper up here. So I'm going to use my brush and the white foreground colour, and I'm going to brush that away. Okay, so the only thing that I'm leaving in the alpha is this red area down here. Okay, so I can switch that off and go back to my layer, the selection again, and this time I'm going to load up the channel called alpha 1. There we have it, and then I can delete, and you can see I've got a torn piece of paper like so. I could have put that in the layer mask as well, but I'm going to just copy this now and copy and paste it onto my document, and there you can see I've got my torn edge little piece of note paper. All right, so I'm going to scale this down so it's about right. I actually think it's a bit wide, so I'm going to allow it. So I'm using Control T to free transform, but I'm going to hold down the Shift key and squash it inwards slightly, and then scale it down. And I'm going to rotate it a tiny bit. So there's our torn edge, a little bit of note paper. I really don't want it to be too big at all. So, oops, a bit bigger than that though. And I think this needs to be underneath my my title and underneath the feet of this trouser suit image. So I'm just going to drop that there and bring that down like that. So it's going to sit there, I think. I also think it might look nice if it was if it had a slight tint. I'm just going to rename my layer and call it Torn Paper. Torn Paper, like so. And I'm going to add a layer effect. So I've just double clicked in this free space here, and I'm going to add a little colour overlay. And oh, as luck would have it, it's given me this rather nice blue by default. Blend mode is set to multiply, which is perfect. And I could find something in the image just by clicking on these tones. I think that blue was rather nice though. Oh, it's too dark. But again, I can change the opacity. So I can take that right down. Maybe that duck egg was nicer. Yeah, I quite like that. Okay, so something like that. So it's more in keeping with the image rather than a bright white piece of paper. And then I'm going to add some text onto here. So I'm going to just type something in and position it on the paper. Now I want this to look like it was typed onto this piece of paper. So there's lots of different typefaces that simulate a typewriter. So it isn't about pristine perfection. It's about pieces that come with a story and promise to get better with age. Now I've cribbed that directly from WGSN and it's way too big to fit in that box, so I'm just going to scale that down. And also it's completely the wrong typeface, so I'm going to find something else that works better. Now I happen to have this typeface. It's called Typecut. It's part of the Adobe type kit, so I'm using this. If you don't have access to this, then find something that you like. And I'm just going to rotate that round so it's the same angle as the lines. And just move that up. And I don't want it to be that close to the top. I think I'll just move it down a little way. Yeah, quite like that. I also think it could do with not being black. So I'm going to select the type again and choose maybe a grey, a nice dark grey, because that looks better on that piece of paper. Okay, yeah, I can live with that. I'm also going to add, as though I've scribbled on it by hand, I've written and scanned some text. So I'm going to use this. So I'm going to copy that and paste it onto my document. Again, it's a bit low down in my layer order, so I'm just going to take it up to the top, and it's a bit big, so Control T. As you can see, most of the things that we're doing is just repeating the same things over and over. So you'll get into a kind of rhythm with this. So I'm just going to pop that on there. It's a bit big. So these are different things that fabric can be made of: silk, bamboo, hemp, linen, rani, metal. And I'm going to drop that there. Now that doesn't look great because it's on this white background, which doesn't look wonderful at all. But if I change my blend mode for this layer from normal, if you have a look at your layers panel, you'll see it says normal here. If we go from normal to multiply, I can lose that background, and that looks fantastic. Okay, I'm also going to add a little drop shadow onto my torn paper. So I'm going to just double click on the effects and add a drop shadow here. That's better. Okay, so that's what that looks like. And then I'm going to finish this off with something similar. I'm going to add some more text up at the top. Again, I could typewrite this. Now that was that type. I think it's called. Yeah, so we'll have this. Again, it's just my handwriting, and I'm going to select all and copy and paste this onto the trend board. Now I want it to come in near the top, so I'm going to paste it at the top, and it's a bit big, so I'm going to scale this down. And again, I need my guides to help me. Still way too big. It needs to really fit in that top section. I might even just stretch it out. At the end of the day, it's handwriting. It can look any way we like. So I'm holding down the Shift key. That's going to allow me to stretch this. Okay, that's a bit more like it, I think. Maybe a tiny bit smaller. Okay, and again, we'll probably lose that background, but I think I need some paper or something to put it on. I think I've got something that will do this. Maybe not the torn brown paper. Let's see what else I've got. Yeah, I think I might use a piece of this. Maybe not all of it. I think I'll just take a piece of this. So a bit of a sliver, like so. So I'm going to copy that and paste. Again, it's coming way too big. So I'm going to just scale this down so it fits in here. And again, I think it's slightly the wrong proportion, so I'm going to just give it a mask. Might just break the grid slightly. There we are. And then free transform and rotate it so it doesn't look too too stuck on. Okay, and then put that on top. Again, that needs to be rotated, so like that, and then change the blend mode to multiply. Okay, this is working. And again, I think I need a drop shadow on that, so I'm just going to copy the drop shadow. Oops, not on that one. Onto here. There we are, that's better. And I think we're almost done. I'm just going to add my, my colour swatches in the next section, and then we'll be done. So as far as the colour swatches go, I'm just going to make straightforward little marquee selections. Like so. Now you could take colour swatches directly off WGSN, or you could sample colours. So I'm going to go to Colour Libraries, and I'm using Pantone Solid Coated. And if I select a colour off my, my page, you can see it will give me the nearest Pantone reference to that particular pixel that I clicked on. So if I wanted this kind of greeny grey colour, or maybe this colour here, this is Pantone 7536. So I'm just going to make a note of this, 7536. So I've just written that down, and I'm going to click OK, and that now appears in here. So I'm going to make a new layer, and I'm going to call this Colour Swatch 1. And I'm going to use my paint bucket tool that lives with the gradient tool, remember, and I'm just going to tip that in there like that. Now I know that that first colour is Pantone 7536, so I'll worry about labelling these in a second. I'm now going to move this marquee. Okay, I'm not going to draw it again. I want them to be exactly the same, so I've literally just grabbed hold of the marquee and moved it down. Okay, and I'm going to sample again. So I go back to my foreground colour, and I'm going to find another colour that I quite like. So I'm going to go for maybe, yeah, I quite like that tone. So I'm going to click OK, and once again I'm going to press G for the paint bucket, and I'm going to press M for the marquee tool and move the marquee. If I hold the Shift key, I can constrain it as well, so it only moves absolutely vertically or horizontally. And then I'm going to find another colour. What should I go for this time? A nice clear cream, I think. Something like that. Oh, I forgot to take a note of what the colour was. Anyway, I'm only playing, so it doesn't really matter. I'm going to press G, flood that in there, and press M to move the marquee. Find another colour, something a bit darker this time. I quite like this dark brown in the background, or I might go for one of these blues, because there's some rather nice looking blues. So let's just see what I can find. Something like that's rather nice. And G, oops, I inadvertently dropped my selection, so I'm just going to have to remake it. It's not ideal. Oops. we are. And I think something darker now to tone with those. So I'm going to move my marquee. And there we go. So my colour swatches are all together. So if I wanted to, I can switch them all off. They all belong together. By rights, I should have made a note of what the Pantone colours are, and then I could have labelled those up. I'll show you the first one being labelled. I'm going to use this typeface again, and the Typeka. So I'm going to type Pantone 7536. And you'll notice I haven't gone any closer than this guide will allow me, because we really shouldn't put text outside of that because it's too important if we lose it. Okay, and that, ladies and gentlemen, in fact I'll just duplicate this text up. Oops. Now the only place that doesn't work is on this one, so I need to select that, and I'm going to change the colour, and I'm going to change it to that colour there because it's lighter. There we are. And there we have it. So that is just about finished. Now there's something that's kind of bothering me. This looks like it all might slide off the page because there's nothing holding anything down. So a nice little technique that I like is to utilise something like this. Let me just show you. I've stuck masking tape onto a sheet and scanned it, and then I can grab, I've just basically lost the background, and I've saved this and I use it all the time. So I can make a selection, copy that and paste it onto my page. It needs to be scaled down because it's rather large. And I could then move that and stick my images down, and if I carry on with that, the effect will look like this. Okay, so this is the trend board completely finished. I've just added some of those bits of masking tape. I've also added some white borders on some of the pictures just to give it a kind of traditional photographic feel. And that's it. As you can see, there is a small amount of text on there, not very much, and I've tried to make it, because the theme of this trend was homespun, it's supposed to be kind of organic and natural, so I've used old typewriter styles and handwriting, and that's about it. That's all I've got. The thing about this trend board exercise is don't take too long about it. Don't stress about it. Get something on paper. Remember, have fun with it. It's all about the visual, guys. Enjoy.